In many stories, violence is often portrayed as a quick means to resolve conflict. Heroes battle villains, and justice is served through combat. But what are the real consequences of a violent life? How does it shape a person, not just in terms of external victories or losses, but internally? Violence is not always black and white, and the stories that confront its emotional and psychological toll often resonate most deeply. Vinland Saga, one of my personal favorite manga, and one I'm sure you have all heard of, masterfully explores this by focusing on the journey of Thorfinn, a character whose quest for vengeance ultimately forces him to grapple with the destructive weight of violence and what it means to truly be a warrior. This internal conflict plays into the idea of a true warrior that's introduced by Thors in the beginning of the series. Thors is universally recognized as a powerful and mighty warrior by even some of the most ruthless characters such as Thorkel. Despite this, Thors is peaceful, altruistic, and falls in line with pacifist ideologies. He is uninterested with war and is more interested with exhibiting integrity and kindness. This is something that heavily contrasts the other characters we may define as warriors in this series, such as Thorkel or Askeladd, and to an extent, even Thorfinn. These characters, despite fitting the term warrior literally, contrast Vinland Saga's ideas of what a warrior is. Thors' definition of a true warrior is not about physical strength or martial prowess, but about having control over one's own impulses and desires. To him, true strength lies not in conquering others, but in conquering oneself. This is a lesson Thorfinn fails to grasp early on, as he's blinded by his thirst for vengeance. Thors' abandonment of violence challenges the very foundation of Thorfinn's worldview, which is rooted in the belief that a warrior must always fight and kill to prove their worth. In rejecting his father's pacifism, Thorfinn chooses a path of destruction, one that seems to promise fulfillment, but ultimately leaves him hollow. The concept of having no enemies, which is the single most iconic line from the series, is probably the best summation of the series' take on what it means to be a warrior. While on the surface level, it may seem like simply being kind to people, it actually reflects something more intrinsic. It embodies a different world where you seek inner peace and purpose as opposed to indulging in violence. It represents the conquering of thirst for blood and separating yourself from it and having control over your desires. The idea that there is more to living than blood and war, that winning your inner battle is what makes someone a warrior. This is the realization Thors had come to, which is why he was able to turn away from violence and war, as opposed to characters like Thorkel, who are entirely defined by bloodshed. Thorfinn is someone who lacked this understanding. He is unable to comprehend Thors' words on the meaninglessness of violence, and when Thorfinn watches his father toss away his sword and then later die, he rejects his father's mentality. If a true warrior did not need a sword, how could he have died? Thorfinn is unable to come to terms with the fact that there is something beyond battle and death, and he allows it to define him and his life. Thorfinn seeks vengeance and works with Askeladd for the promise of killing him eventually. In doing so, Thorfinn kills and destroys other people without remorse because all that's important to him is killing Askeladd. He ignores any consequences of his actions and any form of self-doubt or guilt he might hold. Thorfinn suppresses all the depravity of his actions and puts on a ruthless and emotionless facade, one that packs away all of his internal conflicts and guilt and focuses merely on the external wars that he needs to win. However, deep down, there is a part of Thorfinn that understands that he's really no better than all the Vikings he claims to hate. He merely represses these thoughts and allows them to compound. Thorfinn is even somewhat contradictory. He refuses to kill Askeladd in his sleep or by a sneaky method because he wants to honor his father, but still kills and lives for war and revenge, which is something that his father did not approve of. Thorfinn's naivety in the prologue is incredibly clear. He is unable to see past his immediate goals and reflect on his actions. Thorfinn is finally forced to confront his actions when Askeladd deconstructs him in his dying moments. He asks Thorfinn what will he do with his life now? What will he have left? Has he even thought about these things? Has he thought about how he will live his life? Thorfinn gives no answer to these questions because he never did think. He was only ever concerned with an immediate goal in front of him. Even before the farming arc, Thorfinn was still a slave, but he was a slave to his revenge. something he pursued so endlessly that it completely occupied his thoughts and actions, to the point he became something monstrous and terrible. Everything up until this point has been setting up Thorfinn's mental battle with himself. The farming arc is a perfect antithesis of what Vinland Saga had been portraying. Up until this point, Thorfinn's battles have been external ones, fighting and killing because it's what he learned how to do. Thorfinn is confronted with the meaning and purpose of his life now. He had never given any of these bubbling thoughts any mind. He is thrown into a situation where he must work for his freedom and find his purpose. His war is now consolidated within his own mind, and it's a battle that's far harder to win. He can't stab away at his guilt with daggers. He must confront it and figure out how he plans to resolve the consequences of the life he had led. Thorfinn must now deal with the emptiness left by a life consumed by revenge. The physical labor on the farm symbolizes a different kind of struggle, one that requires patience, humility, and introspection. It's a stark contrast to the blood-soaked world he once inhabited, where every action was driven by anger and a desire for retribution. In the stillness of the farm, Thorfinn is left with nothing but his own thoughts. No enemies to fight, no battles to win. This emptiness becomes the fertile ground for his eventual growth, as now he has nothing to live for. So the consequences of his actions and the guilt finally set in, and he's haunted by his victims. Despite this, when he's pushed to fight, he still defends himself and fights to survive. So internally, Thorfinn knows he still has something to live for. He just doesn't know what that is yet. When Thorfinn faces his mental projection of Askeladd, he is forced to confront the sheer weight of his actions. In this haunting mental space, his past victims rise before him, a visual representation of the guilt that he has been festering beneath his hardened exterior. Climbing over the bodies of the men he killed, Thorfinn acknowledges the irreversible harm he's caused, and for the first time, he begins to feel the crushing burden of responsibility. Askeladd's words echo in his mind, urging him to rise above this cycle of violence, to seek redemption by choosing a path of peace, to not be held down by a world of bloodshed, to become a true warrior. This pivotal moment marks Thorfinn's awakening to the reality that true strength doesn't lie in the blood he shed, but in the choices he makes moving forward. This entire sequence highlights the core theme of Vinland Saga, which is breaking the chains that enslave all of us, no matter what they may be. We are all slaves to something, and internal resolution can only be reached with a free mind and by taking control of our life. We cannot let our negative feelings take hold of our mind and influence our actions. After he leaves the mental realm, Thorfinn is a changed man who seeks to truly live up to his father's image, but is still willing to raise his fist for the right reason when the moment calls for it. A big contrast to the child who once fought and killed for the sake of a single narrow-minded goal that chained him down. The antagonist of the farming arc, Ketil, is a man who is unable to break free of his personal chains, and he let his emotions get the better of him and indulges in violence, the exact opposite of Thorfinn's journey. Thorfinn utilizes Ketil's situation as more of a reason to push past his chains and create a better world, to find Vinland, a place untainted by violence and a peaceful paradise. Thorfinn's ultimate moment is the iconic "I have no enemies" scene. It's Thorfinn finally understanding the message his father told him so long ago, and him finally becoming a true warrior. He has finally broken free from the violence and guilt that once enslaved him. It's a cyclical moment that goes all the way back to Thor's statement of a true warrior not needing a sword, as well as Askeladd's dying message about not being stuck in a world of violence. Additionally, Canute is a character that undergoes a journey parallel to Thorfinn and directly challenges his newly developed view on violence. Like Thorfinn, Canute is thrust into a world of violence and war at a young age, but his response to it evolves in a drastically different direction. Initially weak and timid, Canute gradually transforms into a powerful king, one who, unlike Thorfinn, seeks to consolidate power through control, manipulation, and a vision of a better world. He also wants peace, but seeks to attain it through any means necessary. Canute's journey involves an acceptance of violence for a greater good. He chooses to embrace power through violent means, He becomes a warrior in his own right, but his idea of being a warrior is different from the other characters around him. Canute sees violence not as a tool for personal gain, but as a way to secure his vision of a paradise. Canute and Thorfinn's journeys are, in many ways, mirror images of each other. Both are shaped by violence, but Canute chooses to wield it as a means of achieving his vision of order, while Thorfinn's path is one of rejection and escape from it. Where Thorfinn seeks redemption by confronting his past and seeking peace, Canute ultimately chooses to embrace violence as the means to realize his ideal world. This ideological divide between them becomes clear in their interactions, particularly in their conversation during the end of the farming arc. Canute's vision of a warrior is a ruler who controls the battlefield, who manipulates and bends others to his will, while Thorfinn's understanding of a true warrior is someone who conquers their inner conflict, seeking peace over conquest. While Thorfinn's journey is still not over, even in just the first 2 arcs, Vinland Saga teaches us about the consequences of violence, but also the journey of overcoming it. I look forward to seeing how his journey for peace in Vinland will conclude in the coming chapters of the manga. Ultimately, Vinland Saga argues that a true warrior is not defined by the blood they shed or the enemies they defeat, but by their ability to confront the consequences of their actions, to seek redemption, and to break free from the cycles of violence that hold them captive. Thors, as the embodiment of peace and wisdom, provides the ultimate lesson that the greatest strength lies in having the courage to reject violence and live a life of integrity, free from the burdens of war. Thorfinn's journey is one of self-liberation, learning that to live is to face one's past, to forgive oneself, and to choose a path of peace, not through the denial of strength, but through the mastery of it. And in this, Vinland Saga shows us that the true battle for a warrior is not one fought with a sword, but one fought within. The battle for a life defined by purpose, redemption, and the wisdom to break free from the violence that defines us. That we too, much like Thorfinn, can gather the strength within ourselves to break the chains of whatever it is that enslaves us. Thank you for watching.